Welcome to Choose Courage Inc., where we skip the boring intros and jump straight into reimagining business and workplace experiences with We Ain't Afraid to Go There conversations. In this episode, Ash and I talk about really the uncomfortable, the unspoken, and the unapologetic realities of money, power, and persistence. So no fluff, y'all, no clichés, just straight talk and real strategies. So we're gonna cover a variety of topics in this episode. We chop it up on why fundraising feels personal and how to stop making it that way. We talk about these moments where we reached out to friends with investment asks and they gave us a silent treatment, they ghost us. And how do we process that? And what do you do when conversations with your friends about money get a little messy? We also talk about the biggest lies that we've been told about money, power, and success, why not all money is good money, and when to say no to money that's being offered to you and why. We also talk about the unspoken power moves that separate struggling entrepreneurs from the thriving ones. And we also get into how shifting your mindset can open doors and also bank accounts. So whether you're a founder navigating your first raise, or an entrepreneur shifting your money mindset, or even just someone tired of the same old hustle harder advice, this episode's for you. So today, let's talk about money. I know this is something that you and I have been talking a lot about over the last few weeks, especially as we've been thinking about our family and friends round, as we've been thinking about marketing, sales, all the fun and glorious things that go with starting a business. There's a lot of places we could start. I'm wondering if maybe you could kick us off with, would love to just hear from you, maybe a defining moment in your fundraising journey, maybe a moment that kind of challenged or changed how you think about money and its role in business.
Absolutely. So I remember we had this conversation very shortly after I kicked off the family friends round, and this was in the summer. This was a while ago,
Yeah.
but earlier than that, probably. I was at a conference and everything just clicked. I had seen my therapist before I got on the plane for this conference, and we had been working extensively through, of course, trauma. What do you do in therapy besides go through trauma? But one of the things
Yeah.
that we were working on specifically was my relationship with money as a Black woman who is from a very, I mean, we were poor growing up. We lived in a car, things of that nature. How do you get to the point of asking for money without it feeling like a personal thing and feeling more business? And that was the revelation that I had. And it took me about a year working through this emotional connection that I had with the concept of asking for money. And it brought me into a number of spaces of asking folks within the startup space how they would go out and fundraise. And the hard part about that was a lot of the folks I was talking to were white men, Asian men, white women, and their relationship with money was very business oriented. Ask my friends, do you want to invest in my business? Instead of it being, hey, would you like to give me money so that I can chase my dreams or so that I can work on this thing? They would ask, hey, I have an opportunity for you. And here's what it is. And I have questions. And I didn't recognize that when you ask for advice in startup situations, you're technically asking for people to invest through their knowledge and in most cases through money. And it started me down this whole road of how many times I've been involved in those conversations and didn't know that that was the technique of the initiation of fundraising in family and friends, but then also the many times that I slept on those opportunities where I was genuinely asking for advice, not recognizing the hesitancy that folks had in responding to me was because they knew that a question is synonymous in the startup fundraising as asking for money. So I know that that was a huge, dense revelation, but it was eye-opening in so many ways, but also it was a breakthrough in realizing that this is just about business and it's about an opportunity and it is about investing and you having the potential opportunity to gain more than you invested when you invest in great companies.
Yeah. Can maybe share a little bit more about that there's a little bit of like a mindset switch of understanding business as an opportunity, especially if you have been working in corporate settings, you're not used to entrepreneurship. Can you maybe expound a little bit on what that kind of click and switch was for you to see it as such?
It really was about me detaching my personal feelings from money. And there was a LinkedIn post that I had read within that whole process where I actually think it was a tweet. Nonetheless, it was a message that a person had shown their insecurities about money and how they will always have a hard relationship with money. And I started to think about that. And that's one of the pieces I took back to my therapist is I actually don't feel an attachment to money in the way that if I lose it, the reality for me is I've already been at the bottom. I don't really have a fear of what the bottom is, but I recognize that a lot of people who have never been poor or never had to be incredibly resourceful or never had to depend on EBT or never had to literally borrow food from neighbors and beg, right? People who've never done that, they don't have that same relationship. But then also those who do have that or have had that, sometimes the response is that they have a hypersensitivity to money. So my relationship with money completely is on one end of that spectrum, having come from a low background of I'm not afraid to lose it all. And therefore I'm a little bit more I take a lot more risk than some folks who have been poor and have earned money and then no longer feel comfortable with the idea of letting that money go. But that mindset shift came with not only acknowledging that piece of the way I think about money, but then realizing that even though I had that relationship with money, I still never felt comfortable with asking for it. And so all of my money that I had up until that point was earned. All of it was through hard work and through luck and extensive opportunities. And so something that was instilled in me when I was young is you don't want to embarrass your family by asking for food or asking for money. And so that translated directly into this business venture of, hey, do you want to invest? But to me, it was, hey, do you want to give me money? Which really needed to be recalculated in my brain of, no, this is an actual investment. This is business. And now I'm seeing business the same way a lot of other people see it instead of, can you give me money because I'm poor? Or can you give me money and it's shameful? It's no, it's an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think something you're bringing up is what I imagine a lot of people will have to wrestle through on their entrepreneurial journey, especially if you come from an upbringing where money was tight, you didn't have any. It's understanding that how you have related to money, your upbringing around money will influence how you relate to money in your business. Even things like if you really struggle at managing your money in your personal life, it's gonna impact you in your business. And those mindset shifts are so, so incredibly important. I think for me, one of my first memories of a mindset shift was actually back in this was February of 2018. I was working at Google at the time, and Spotify in New York was doing this event during Black History Month around building Black wealth. And they were bringing advisors and other people to really kind of speak into what does it mean to think about money and relate to it differently. And I'd already gotten a little bit of a taste of it being at Google and just having colleagues where I'm like, wow, they think about money very differently than I do, and that I have grown to understand money as. But this event was definitely a moment where I was seeing other Black professionals just speak about investing, resources, real estate, just thinking, helping me to understand how do you relate to and move with money differently.
Mhm.
And just realizing, oh, that there are people who it's not just they handle money differently, but they think about it and relate to it very differently. And I think over the years, I've been able to meet more people, whether that's within the workplace or within the entrepreneurship world, who, wow, they just really think about money differently. And I did not grow up with that. Money was always very tight. There was always a lot of shame around asking for money. And it was just something that we tried not to do, we didn't do. And if we did, we were just, yeah, there's just a lot of negative self-talk that went with that. And so I think for me, like, we did a family and friends round for moonpaws earlier last year or middle of last year. And I think one of the biggest surprises, maybe moments of reckoning, you and I talked about this, was there were people who before were like, "Oh, let me know when you're raising, and I'd love to be a part of that." Or there were just people where we talked all the time. We're in each other's DMs on Instagram, on our phones. And then as soon as I extended an invitation to invest in this opportunity, they were just quiet, actually like ghosting me, which
Mhm.
was so weird because wow, we talk all the time, but now is like when you're like, just say no or just say, it's not a good time. I've had to since then acknowledge and make peace with the fact that, they probably have their own issues and shame around money.
Mhm.
But for me, it was just a general, communication thing. It was almost a respect thing, right? If we're talking all the time in the DMs and in texting and all of a sudden you're literally ghosting me, what's up? What's good? Why that kind of switch? And over time, those people started to message me again about other things. And I let it go. I didn't bring it up of like, hey, I noticed you're talking to me again, but you didn't answer that text that I sent you 2 months ago. And I've just learned that it's more of an exercise of acceptance. I think that how do you not take it personally when people who have been in your corner all along decide to opt out of being in your corner or even just communicating to you within this moment?
That is that's a loaded topic. I do remember that conversation we had. I remember my feelings then, and my feelings have shifted a little bit since. I appreciate you calling out. It's
Mhm.
more of a reflection of other people's relationship with money
Yeah.
when you are, and that's been through me doing this for so long now, right? I think that after a while, you just become so business oriented about it. It's either there or it's not. So many of my processes around this business are it's either a yes or a no. There's very little gray area that I'm willing to sit in with a lot of these opportunities. And I don't mind asking again. I think that a part of the marketing, a part of the business is really grinding and understanding that you are making sure you're going to the extents that you need to make this big business flourish. So for me, those folks that did invest in me, they know that I am
Mhm.
beating these streets. They know that I am doing the work to make sure that we stay afloat because that's my job. That literally is my job. Did I feel that way then? No. I recognize those moments of bringing up investment. I remember that initial email that I sent out to so many people, and some people were really great with, "Hey, I actually don't invest in early stage opportunities." There are some folks who are just like, "Now's not a great time." I will say, just for the note on this, is that the folks who were more willing to tell me their position on whether they wanted to invest or not come from affluent backgrounds. They come from places
Mm.
where they grew up with money and had more healthy conversations about money as they grew up. And I think that that speaks a large part to this as well is we just, at least I can say, we didn't grow up with a really natural and healthy conversation about money. It was always shameful. Even when money was, when we had money, it was never something that we talked about. And this is something as I've grown in my career and made more money that I've gotten more accustomed to. It's just talking about money is it's just a fact. It's either there, or it's not. And hey, you need to borrow some money. I lend money. I never lend money that I don't, I never lend money that I expect to come back to me. So my no or yes is always dependent on whether I can lose it or not. And the conversation about money, I want my family and friends to be comfortable enough to come to me and say, "Hey, I'm in a tight spot," or "Hey, how did you invest in this?" Because that was what was lit to me when I was just learning about money. I always talk about the story of my first house that I bought. And it was a really close friend of mine who said, "Hey, you're closer than you think." And no one had ever said that to me. No one had ever been like, "You know what, Ash? despite where you came from and all the things you've been through, you're in a different life now, and homeownership is for you. And you're
Mm,
probably a lot closer than you think. I was in contract 3 weeks later after that conversation for my first home that I bought in
okay.
San Francisco, and completely life changing financially. So the relationship with money, even through this business, even through the therapy, even through that switch of this is a personal ask and I'm feeling a sort of way about people not responding or ghosting me. I just don't see it. I don't see it personally anymore.
Mhm.
However, I resonate with the feeling and I notate, right?
For
And
sure.
that's just for myself. I think there's a black book somewhere that I have that has notes about how I feel about certain individuals that I'm, that either we're on board or we're not. And so
Yeah.
there.
Do you follow up with people who ghosted you and ask them again? Because you said you're willing to follow up and ask again.
Oh yeah. I mean, here's another part of it is as we are ramping up, because we're in the middle of fundraising right now, we're ramping up for that, we're doing pitches and all of that, is where we are now is completely different than where I was then. And all the conversation in the founderscape, I suppose, about this is in the beginning, if you can get that pre-seed money or you can get that -1 to 0 money is somebody investing as you as an individual. And I think that that carried a little bit of pain. That was a ping as well is, oh, people don't think my ideas can flourish and thrive. There are people out there who they don't see me as the person who can carry this along. And so asking then was really, hey, you've seen me be successful in other arenas, invest in me because that's what you're investing in at that point. I had to do a lot of work around that as well, is recognizing that those people who said no, you were saying no to me. You're saying no to me as somebody who maybe you've seen me do the work that I've done. Is that a reflection on how you feel about me? Is that a reflection on how you feel I contribute to the world? Is that a reflection on my work ethic? And now that we have a product out in the world and we are getting sales and we have, numbers to show for it and we have traction, I will circle back around and I will ask. It'll be coming from a different place,
Mm,
but that's for both of us, right? You needed the proof.
yeah.
That's fine. And I recognize you needed the proof and that's fine. But I recognize you needed the proof.
This is so interesting. I'll admit I'm probably in a little bit of a different place.
Hmm.
Um, there are people that I will circle back to because they said no, they communicated that, or because I just know their personal situation and that's why they ended up opting out. I feel I wouldn't, and I have my own list, for folks where we have a friendship, we're communicating on a regular basis,
Hmm.
and you just give me the silent treatment, I'm not circling back, and that's fine.
Oh,
And it's not,
I'm
it's not,
checking
it's
on the petty.
yeah, yeah. It's not even petty. It's more of a respect thing. Like we're friends and we have a relationship. We're in each other's DMs. And the silence treatment that's not okay for me. It
Right.
doesn't mean I hold it against them. It doesn't mean I'm like, wow, you're a terrible friend. And it doesn't mean my friendship has changed with them at all. We're still kikiing it in the DMs and whatnot, but I'm not asking you again. And
Sure.
especially as I become more successful and this product becomes more successful, the silent treatment is more of a, and again, to each their own. But for me, I receive it as you didn't appreciate and honor our friendship enough to even just talk to me. But
Yeah.
instead, you decided to ghost me, be silent, and then slide into my DMs a few weeks later as if I wasn't texting you a few times a month ago asking you what your thoughts were on this.
Sure.
So, and again, I know money follows movement.
Hmm.
There's certain people where I didn't ask this round because I knew I wanted to ask them later when we had more movement. Just because I knew where they were at and just how they think about things. But it was the disrespect for me. But
Sure.
again, we're still cool. I'm still friends with them. It hasn't changed how I view them as being a good friend, but I'm not asking you again.
Right.
That door is closed. And so that's definitely where I fall. I don't take it personally in terms of, "Oh, you don't believe in me per se," because I feel like I just have done a lot of work to where courtesy of therapy, where I just know what I'm capable of and I don't need the validation of other people within that. So if I miss a few people validating that, that's fine because I know there are a lot of other people who see me, who get me, and who will be ride or die for me. And that's
Mhm.
cool. So yeah, I definitely have my own little book and I keep track. I do have a list of people that said no. And I have a column of invite them again later on, yes or no. So I have my yeses and I have my nos, and it's fine.
Yeah. That is still it's so loaded because when I was mentioning I'm heavy on the petty is that's my perspective. My experience of being petty is I will
Mhm.
not ask you again. So maybe I should have been more clear earlier where I will not circle back to everybody. Not everybody's getting that second ask.
Yeah,
And yes, it
yeah.
is because of the respect. It is because of the interaction and engagement we had with the initial ask. And again, though, I don't know that now I can say I harbor any feelings about it. It just is what it is. And if you can't communicate to me a yes or no about money at this scale, then it's probably not a good idea that we go into business anyways. We're going to have harder conversations in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And that to me is the thing is now that this business switch is actually on, the relationship is the investment. Can we have this conversation about money if the business is not going well? Can we have this conversation about money when we're about to pull a huge series A and, we're dealing with this potential investor and it's going to mean, stock and options and equity are being split in this manner, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Those are the harder conversations ahead of us. And if you can't say a simple no or yes, then it probably isn't the best idea that we go into business in the first place. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fine. No harm, no foul. And
Yeah, all
again,
good.
water off that's back is what I always say is, all right, cool. I'll catch you on the flip. What I've also realized too is there are a lot of things I just don't have time for anymore.
Mm,
I just don't have time for the consistent plea in the validation piece is what you mentioned on this part is please
mhm.
see me, please invest in me, please do that thing. I don't need you to see me, like you said. I
Yeah,
got
yeah.
many of other people. And I think we've heard this in many arenas at this point is the folks that invest in you are likely going to be the people who don't know you over the people who do. Social media teaches me that every day where you've got people, that followed for years, no in person, don't comment, don't talk, don't like. And that's fine because I don't know how people live their social media lives. But then there are folks that I've never met. Tell me when it drops. Let me know what I can download. Let me know, when I can talk to my company about it. I don't know these folks, but thank you for your support.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Love it.
I wanna circle back to a comment you were saying earlier because I feel there's some people who might be listening to this who need this reminder of so many of us have been conditioned to, whether it's within the workplace or within life, to endure and to kind of beg for validation from other people who should have never been put in that position to have that much sway or say into our validation in the first place. And
Hmm.
so for some folks who are listening to this is just a friendly reminder of you don't need other people to remind you and tell you that your idea is good and that your idea is worthwhile.
Hmm.
You don't need it.
You don't need it.
Um, I'll often say we're not everyone's cup of tea, but whose we are will be in a big way. And some of y'all don't even realize that there are people who don't even know that they're waiting for you to show up with your
Mhm.
idea or as your full self, right? So I hope that will be a moment of encouragement for folks listening. I'm curious, have you faced moments where money or the lack of it tested your confidence or vision as a founder? And
Uh,
if you have, how did you kind of navigate that?
Absolutely. So, good Lord.
Pick one
This
story.
is, pardon?
I said, just pick one story.
Pick one story. Yeah. I think the biggest one is as a founder, you're always looking at runway. And there's a certain number of runway months wise that I feel the most comfortable with for me to feel confident in my dealings. And when there was a moment where we started to slip into this area of runway that I was not comfortable with, I did not feel confident to be able to have the conversations with the future rounds of funding or with the potential customers that I was working with to say, not only am I going to sell you the best product, but it's going to last, right? And that was one of the hardest times because you do question, is this going to fail? Am I going to be able to satisfy people's needs? This vision that I've built, is it going to thrive? And the things that I recognized is that one, I just set myself up really well from an investment perspective personally to be able to one, have the conversation as a family. So my family is very much a part of the conversation about this business because we are still bootstrapping at this point. And we had to make a number and have a conversation about how much we were going to invest in this before we called it quits. And that was at the pinnacle of that. That was all right, we are getting close to that number and I don't feel comfortable putting any more of our money into this. And right. But just as we were slipping off the cliff, right? We saw, sales increase and we saw these opportunities come in and when the money wasn't there, all of a sudden it was there. And I am so thankful for that because one, the confidence does not have to be about how much runway. You can just be confident about the product. But I will say for me, as a first time startup founder, runway is a huge part of your conversation about future funding. It's a huge part of your conversation about your goals with your team. And again, for me, it was about the confidence I was able to show up to some of these conversations and saying that it was there. So, yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Ooh, I appreciate you noting how important it is to have your family's voice in it
Yep.
and to be intentional in looping them in and having them actually just be a part of the team in the process. I
Mhm.
think I've talked to a lot of founders before where it feels and is such a lonely journey for them because they aren't also consulting and talking to people that really know them and who are also part of this journey with them. Yeah, I guess when I kinda think about this moment, there's one specific moment where money, really the lack of it, kinda tested my commitment, confidence, vision as a founder was with my first business, HmntyCntrd, and this was in the winter of 2023. So this was
Mhm.
when the tech industry was burning to the ground, and there were layoffs left and
All
right.
over the place.
All over the place, and I had just grown my team the previous year, and, we were doing well, all these things, and now we're having clients delay their contracts. They're kicking it 6 months down the road or they're canceling them, and I'm just watching our money just drain,
Mhm.
and if I trusted my gut sooner, I would had laid off members of my team sooner to help to keep and buoy the business. But just a lot of shame and guilt led me to more at the last minute letting certain people go. And, at some point, me and my business partner weren't paying ourselves because we wanted to make sure that we were paying the other people on our team. And it was so stressful. And there was also a lot of personal stuff happening too around this time. It was just a perfect storm. It was terrible. Tease
Yeah.
for terrible is what was going on. And in February 2023, I was in the truly lowest place I've ever been in my whole life. And I just remember talking to my business partner, and there's two conversations I remember. One is talking to my business partner, and I was so upset, so stressed as I'm trying to think about how do we keep the business afloat. And she was, well, what are you really afraid of? And I just paused for a little bit and I just had this moment where I was like, I don't want to be like my parents. And I just remember just how much my parents struggled with
Mhm.
money and the way it impacted us. And there's so much underneath that we don't have time to get into. And I just realized I was so afraid of getting to that place. And my business partner was like, well, good news. There's a lot of evidence about who you are and just your life in general that shows that you're not heading that direction. So I don't think you need to worry about that. And sometimes you need people to remind you of who you are, how far you've come. And so I'm forever thankful for her. But the other moment was I was talking to a really good friend of mine, and I was just telling him about how everything is burning around me. And I was like, I feel I'm about to lose everything. And even just the shame of potentially having to tell people, right? Hey, we're not making it, and I need to regrettably find another job in corporate America. Yuck. Um, and he was like, well, do you believe in the vision of humanity centered of this business? Do you really believe in what you're building and how it's helping people and what you're doing? And I was like, yeah, of course. He's like, then you'll find a way.
Yep.
Go find a way. And just having him speak that truth and reminding me, yeah, if I really believe this, I will make it happen. And we did. And but because of that trauma as well, we were also a lot more innovative and creative in some of our revenue streams because I told my business partner I never ever want to get to this place again. The anxiety was actually too much on my nervous system.
Mhm.
And now we're at a place where we've worked really hard. You know, we were able to take 4 months off last year. We have enough in reserve, so if we didn't wanna work this year, we wouldn't have to. And
That's a
so
flex.
that was trauma that moved us to that point. I was like, "Oh, no, I cannot go back here again." But in doing so, it allowed us to be more creative because you have to be
Mhm.
creative when you're scrapping and you're like, "Ooh, I don't know if we're gonna make it."
Creativity, first off, thank you for sharing that story. That's such a moment of I don't want to be like my parents. I think that especially us who have come from our origins where we've seen the mistakes, we've seen how systemic issues and cultural issues and just life has not created the best past image of our potential future for us,
Mm,
which is a trauma push, if you will, right? I think there are a lot of us, specifically Black women, who are charged by the running from something at some point. I don't want to say generally in an umbrella statement that we're consistently and always, because personally, I don't feel like I'm running from anything at this point. Was I at one point? Yes, absolutely. But the creativity is what I want to talk to at this point.
mm,
I had an interaction on LinkedIn recently where it was talking about those early stage sales, right? And what do we do? First off, I'm going to give it up to Black women, where I really just don't understand why we don't have more Black women who are being funded for startup opportunities. Because when you talk about hustle,
mm.
I have never hustled harder in my life. And when you talk about creativity, even 2 weeks ago, I was on campus. We had a slight pivot with one of our offerings, and it's for early ed, or it's for higher ed early career. I was on campus with these beautiful little babies who are getting ready to go into the career, into their early careers. And this was all from an article I read about how 2025 graduates are feeling about going into the workforce.
Mm,
And so I was like, let's go find out. Let's do it. The many different income streams, the resiliency, the, running, and also just now being able to drink our water and have clear skin. Having been through all that and made it through the hurdle, right? This is a compliment as well as a call out of we did all that and here we are. And I think that that
mm,
speaks a lot to how we are consistently finding a way. I appreciate your friend for calling that out and saying, "Do you believe in this mission?" So often folks talk about Counterpoint, for example, the product is almost irrelevant. It's the solution to the problem, right? I am dedicated. I am true to this problem. I have been for so much of my career. And when I get that question from investors or from folks that I'm talking to as potential customers, it's we will pivot as many times as we need to make sure we're addressing the problem in the right way and people are getting the support that they need. And I think that that's the creativity is we will always find a way for the training to hit, for the tool to be the tool, for the support to be the right thing, the conversation to be right, because that's what we've always done.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, have you ever maybe faced a tough decision where accepting money could have compromised your values or your vision?
Every day,
Mm,
every day. And I think that's part of this game as well is I have this spreadsheet of over 200 VCs, private equity, potential investors that I am still doing due diligence on. And
mhm,
I know that that is almost backwards coming from a demographic that receives such small portions of the VC money that's out there in the world in general. But here's the reality is so much of what I'm after means that folks need to be about that mission. And this isn't just about accepting money that becomes a problem when we're trying to solve that overall problem that we're looking to solve with the tool. If I if I'm being honest with myself, if I'm being honest with the reality that I am after a solution, then I need to recognize not all money is going to support me in doing that thing.
mm,
And so saying no to money, as hard as it can be sometimes, is necessary. And finding the right partners and really crafting out the vision. They don't have to understand it in completion, but they definitely have to give you the space to be able to do what you need to do to grow the business because of the need, right? The business grows because there's a need for your solution.
mhm,
And
mhm,
sometimes that takes time, and not all money affords you that time or space.
mhm. Not all money affords you that time or that space.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it makes me think about I've had moments with humanity centered where we walked away from clients, fired clients, didn't pursue certain contracts. But I think in this conversation, I'm thinking specifically of an opportunity we had with moonpaws where we had this company that wanted to fly us out to do these live pet astrology readings with our app. And the now keep in mind, I'm bringing a lot of how I think about work and people from humanity centered, and I'm mapping it onto moonpaws.
Sure.
And so I remember we were having a conversation with the organizers for this event, and they said to us, yeah, we need, a bunch of these things delivered to us, signed, whatever, by tomorrow. Now, I could have stayed up super late to get all
Mhm.
these things done, mess up my sleep to quote unquote make them happy. Or we had a decision of do we want to honor our boundaries and that we're not just gonna, neglect ourselves because you snapped your fingers and said we want this.
Mhm.
And so, I had a conversation with my partners. I'm like, listen, if we actually honor our ethos and our boundaries and who we are, there's a chance that we might lose this client. Are y'all cool with that? And yeah, that's fine. This is why I love working with people who are in alignment with you. This is why it's
Yep.
really important to work with people who are in alignment with you. And so I told them, yeah, part of our brand, our ethos, the way that we want people to experience us when they engage with our product is to not feel this unnecessary false sense of urgency and scarcity.
Mhm.
So tomorrow's also Friday, and I'm just gonna assume none of us are actually gonna be working on Friday. So I can get you this on Monday, end of day. And sent it, waited, and they came back, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Of course it is, because none of
Okay.
this is life or death. None of this is life
None
or
of it.
death. It can wait a couple days, and I promise you life will move on and it will be okay.
Mhm.
And so that's a good example of a story that worked in our favor. If they had said no, it would have been a lesson in learning, but more so of a blessing, right? Of us not working with and submitting ourselves to being with a client who didn't honor our humanity, who
Mhm.
didn't honor like, the vision that we have in terms of how we think about the way that we want to relate to people, we want people to relate to us. And therefore, we expect them to also consider us in that way. And so I think in business, you'll have these moments where you're going to have to decide, am I going to continue on with the status quo? Or am I actually going to honor my values and my gut and what I know is to be right, even if that means saying no to
Mhm.
someone who's writing my check?
Yep. Yep. And to that note, honoring your values really means you've defined them and you understand them and what they do for you. And I say that because for me, In some cases, running that extra mile is part of the value. It depends on what the condition is. And in other cases, it really is about rest. And
For
I
sure.
think that that's a certain level of maturity of understanding what is truly going to have me performing at the highest to be able to continue to support this business in the best way possible. And that means for the employees, that means for the customers, and for everyone else involved, because this is a business. And
Mhm.
so much of your decision falls onto all of these other parts that have individuals who have lives and need that guidance and that leadership. And being values driven, it will deter a number of people, but it also will attract so many. And that's what I've learned time and time again through many different phases of my career and life is that you will find your folks and your folks will find you. And that's the way that life works. So
Mm,
I
yeah.
love that. I'm so glad they came back with a yes. That feels so good that you ask.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't ask. So
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, let's wrap up on this note. Is it kind of reflecting on your journey? What's maybe one practical step that you feel listeners to this episode today can take to build confidence in discussing money or raising funds for their vision?
that's a good question. Learn more about money.
That part.
Learn more about money. The more you learn about money, the more you learn about how the world works when money's involved, the more comfortable you are talking about it.
Mm,
And
hmm.
whether it's personal experience, whether you have a friend or a resource that you can ask and have a conversation with, or whether it's a book, there's so many amazing books. There are even, I got hit up on LinkedIn. One of the folks that I met last year in this startup community I was in, she's launched a Black women in financial health coaching. And that's the stuff you need to be investing in for yourself so that you can have these better conversations about money down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll plus one that I'll maybe split into two buckets. It's like learning about money and how people think about money and navigate money in different spaces, both in business as well as personally. And I would even say, even in terms of real estate, just kind of thinking about how people think about money in other industries. So, a book that was super helpful for me was The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, Housel. And that just kind of opened the floodgates in terms of how money works.
Mhm,
Not just how to think about money, but how does money also work? What are the ways that my brain can kind of take these shortcuts that can end up hurting me in my relationship with money? I know in terms of just learning about how different industries and people think about money, I had this stint of listening to what's called the Bigger Pockets
mhm,
podcast, which gets into real estate investing. And it's just really fascinating to hear other industries and how they're thinking about growth and generational wealth.
mhm,
So, I've really enjoyed that. Even though don't have my own real estate portfolio, I just loved hearing how people were being strategic and creative, how they're thinking about finances and navigating that. And the last one I'll put out there that was really helpful for me personally was this course called The Trauma of Money. So if you
mhm,
go to the traumaofmoney.com, it's a live cohort experience and it is so good. And it really helped me to begin the journey of kind of healing from things related to my upbringing, even things professionally that cause a lot of harm and damage to how I think about my own value, how I think about money, so on and so forth. So the traumaofmoney.com is a really great resource. And yeah, I'd recommend for folks who are curious, who are interested in taking practical steps towards increasing that confidence to start looking at those places.
yeah. I'm gonna put a bookmark on one thing, which is your value. You said how to evaluate your value in
Mhm.
the scope of money. That's an entire second episode. So let's bookmark that. We'll come
Noted.
back to folks. Let's talk about it.
I love it. Thanks for hanging out with us and diving into some of these real and unfiltered conversations. We know your time is valuable, and so we don't take it for granted. If today's episode made you think, if it challenged you, or gave you something new to consider, we'd love for you to hit that follow button on whatever streaming service you're using. That way, you'll never miss an episode when we drop them. And if you want to go even deeper, sign up for our newsletter at choosecourageinc.com, and you'll get updates on new episodes, access to exclusive freebies, and first dibs on coaching opportunities and other resources to help you make bold moves in your life and business. So we appreciate you, we see you, and we're rooting for you. Until next time, keep choosing courage over comfort, and a friendly reminder to drink some water.